Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel where you see every single nut and bolt that we work on. This is Jacob, I'm Grant, and we're back to Project Felicity. 18 months of work and still nothing to show for it. But anyway, today is President's Day and I have the day off. Jacob can help for just a little bit. So, done working on the Rubicon for now. Still need to do a few small little other things to it, but it runs, it drives, it passed inspection. It gets 17 miles per gallon. But hey, you know, we kind of knew that.
It gets you places.
Yeah. And it is comfortable. I will say that. Like,
it is.
It's awesome.
It's very comfortable.
I miss my automatic. But anyway, we're going to try to get a lot done today because I don't have to work today, and it's kind of amazing. So here's what I hope to get done. And probably at the end of the video, I will have gotten one thing done because that's
how it works.
That's how it goes.
That's how it works.
So by the end of the day, it's going to run and drive. So good. We got that out of the way.
There we go. Maybe we can get what we want done.
Okay,
now.
so now in the list of orders of what we're actually going to try to do, we're going to put the front grille back on, make it look like a Jeep again, hook up the radiator hoses. That's real simple. In the interest of getting this on the road and on the trails, I really don't have a skid plate for it right now, and I found this. This is a skid plate just for the transmission. So, in lieu of a real skid plate right now, we're just going to bolt that onto it. It came with hardware and everything. So that's going to be the next thing we do. Once that's done, we're going to run the transmission cooling lines from the AW4 to the radiator. That should be pretty simple. I just want to make sure we don't hit anything hot or moving parts.
Yes.
Excuse me. Early morning, just had coffee. Then the really big goal of today is I want to figure out the wiring so we can do two things. Here, let's show this. I want to reinstall the starter and actually see the motor spin. And if we get all of that done, maybe we work on getting the fuel lines started to run. But the end goal for today, by the end of today, I want to be able to turn the key and see the Kubota V2403 spin. So, enough talking. Time lapse. So the first order of business was to get the radiator back in place. Having an extra set of hands here really made it a lot easier to get the fender and the front grille to line up correctly. Again, repeating the same process on the passenger side of the TJ. Here we're securing the fender to the front grille with the back side bolts. I had misplaced two of the bolts, so I just skipped the middle fasteners. And lastly, I am installing the lower front grille bolt. With the front grille reinstalled, I then go to attach both the upper and lower radiator hoses. Here, Jacob is reattaching the front support bar to the front grille. Here I'm securing the breather hose for the front axle to the top of the radiator. Moving to the underside of the Wrangler, we first figure out which bolts we need to remove from the AW4 pan so we can install the new skid plate on our automatic transmission. The skid plate came with all new hardware, so we will not be reusing the bolts that we took out of the transmission. With all the bolts that needed to be removed, we put the new skid plate in place and installed the new fasteners that came with the skid plate into the AW4 automatic transmission. While we were installing the skid plate, we found the bolts that go between the flex plate and the torque converter.
So I first installed the bolts between the flex plate and the torque converter without cinching the bolts down so I could get all the bolts in without worrying about screwing up the threads on the bolts. With all the bolts started, I would then tighten each bolt holding the flex plate with my hand. Next, it was time to install the starter onto the AW4 automatic transmission. Next, I removed the original fitting for the transmission cooling line on the AW4 automatic. Next, I installed my AN adapter fittings so I can hook up an AN6 line to the AW4 automatic. Unfortunately, once I got both adapters installed, I realized the original fitting had an O-ring, so I had to pull both AN6 adapters out and install brand new O-rings on them. Installing the hose clamp on the upper radiator hose. I made the decision to run the transmission cooling lines along both sides of the engine. I just thought this would be easier than trying to route the line around the front of the Kubota V2403. I had made the decision not to really mount the lines because I really just wanted to get the engine spinning. Here I cut off the original shifter cable for the original automatic transmission. After quickly vacuuming out the original battery tray, I install a battery so I can start working on the wiring harness. Here I decided to go ahead and hook up the wiring harness back up to the two front headlights and also ground them to the front grille. A multimeter is an invaluable tool when you're doing an engine swap like this. I have the battery hooked up and I'm trying to look for a 12 volt source to know when I have key switch on. On the original motor, the starter and the alternator were on the same side. However, on my Kubota V2403, the starter is going to be on the opposite side from the alternator, so I'm having to separate out the starter wire and the charging wire from the original wiring harness. While this isn't difficult to do, you really want to take your time because you don't want to damage any of the wires in the harness that you are trying to take apart. I've actually sped up this time lapse quite a lot because this ended up taking me over an hour. Originally, I really thought I would be able to separate the one wiring loom that I needed out of the main engine bay wiring harness, but the more I unraveled it carefully, the more I realized I was not going to be able to get just the select few wires I wanted. And here is where I lost my patience with trying to separate out the wiring harness and the cutters came out.
Okay guys, I was trying to take the wiring harness apart nicely, and then it just kept getting more and more complicated, to be very honest with you. So this is the plug that I think I need to basically run everything. And the only reason I kept all of this junk is this is the power and signal for the fuel pump and the fuel sending unit, and I'm almost positive this is the wiring for the output speed sensor on the backhand side of the transfer case, so I know how fast I'm going. So those were kind of important. All these other wires that I cut, quite frankly, I don't need. Or if I do, I've got so much wiring harness left over. doesn't matter. Originally I was going to try to keep the wiring harness uncut, but the more I dug into it, the more I realized that wiring harness had problems. So anyway, back to time lapse.
With the wiring harness that I had cut out of the original engine bay wiring harness plugged back into the Wrangler, I then used my multimeter to locate the starter solenoid wire. With the correct wire located, I can then now wire up the wiring harness to the starter motor solenoid. It was here that I realized I wasn't able to remove the Phillips head screw on the starter solenoid, so I was going to have to remove the starter from the AW4 automatic transmission. With the starter resting on the fender, I then wired the starter to the wiring harness. To do this as cleanly as possible, I went back to the original engine bay wiring harness and pulled the same wire so I would have enough length and so the wire would be the same color so it would be more consistent to troubleshoot any problems in the future. With the starter solenoid wire made, I reinstalled the starter, hooked up the solenoid wire and the main battery cable to the starter. The last thing I did was reinstall the dipstick tube into the AW4 automatic and pour in some fresh ATF into the transmission.
Okay guys, I've been busting my butt today. Wiring harness ended up being kind of a nightmare to do. We have the starter on. We have the torque converter bolts back on. Like, we got a lot done today. What I haven't tried yet is hitting the key switch, and seeing if the engine turns over. It will not start. I have not supplied fuel, and this fuel cutoff solenoid here is not energized, so there is no way this engine can start. All I'm trying to do is see if the engine spins, because I have not seen this engine spin in like 18 months. I've got to figure out a better battery situation. This whole wiring harness thing is I knew it was going to be ugly. I didn't know it was going to be this ugly. I did put about 3 quarts of automatic transmission fluid in the transmission because I had filled the torque converter, and you don't want to spin the torque converter with nothing in the transmission. It's going to need more fluid than that. But that's all the fluid I have, and I really just want to hear this thing spin real quick. We have nothing there. Nothing there. Here we go. Oh, it spins. Okay, I'm by no means done, and there's a lot of ugly here. Like, I've literally just got rubber lines going from the transmission to the radiator. Like, I have nothing holding it in place. I need to address that. I've got to figure out all this. Like, we're not done. But that's the biggest amount of progress I've seen in 18 months. Oh. Hey, you know what? I'm going to call it quits. Because, no, I'm going to do it one more time. Just one more time. And the serpentine belt stayed on. Oh man. Yeah. Leave a comment down below. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. If you didn't, you know what to do. And hey, if you haven't subscribed, consider subscribing. And if you have, as always, thank you. And I'll see you in the next video very soon. Goodbye. Divorce.